Hello, meteorologist Brad Warner from Region Weather Live with an update regarding the snowstorm set to run across the Dakotas and Minnesota for Tuesday on into Wednesday. And as we take a look at the surface map, we see that the Gulf is already sort of opening up to allow some moisture into our area. The model's depicting some rain and some snow, and perhaps even some thunderstorms across far southwestern South Dakota and into far western parts of Nebraska. And wouldn't you know it, right into South Dakota, right on time with that model. We are seeing those rain showers, the heavier rains, and some snow moving in across the Black Hills region. Perhaps probably more than likely some bright banding going on. That's why you're seeing some of those intense red colors in there. So some rain transitioning over to snow. That's why you get those brighter colors in there. And actually, as we go just a little bit further to the south, we even got a severe thunderstorm warning impinging on Sidney, Nebraska as well. So quite a potent system already getting going here for Monday night. So the moisture is already in place. As we just saw, the rain and the snow is already beginning to develop here Monday night. And as we go into the nighttime hours, the moisture continues to get drawn further into this system. We continue to have rain and snow develop through the overnight hours and into the early parts of Tuesday morning. And then as we continue on through the day on Tuesday, more and more moisture eventually just keeps getting pulled into this system. And it's looking more favorable that we will see at least a band of heavy snow. If you remember a few storms ago, a few weeks ago, we had a storm pull out of the Rockies, and the storms developed so far out ahead of the main portion of the system that the moisture had to work its way all the way in through Michigan and come back up in through Minnesota and back around. There was a lot of dry air that got punched in behind that precipitation, and really ultimately limited how much moisture and how much snow fell in that particular system. With this one, not so much the case. As we get into Tuesday evening, those storms finally begin to develop across Nebraska and in through Kansas as well, and it starts to push in through Iowa. So we already had the moisture in place further north. These storms are a little closer to the low pressure system. They're actually a little further north than that system was as well. And as we go through the overnight hours, you can see how those storms stay pretty tight to that low pressure, so that that moisture continues to get sucked up and gets fairly close to our area, or gets fairly close to the low pressure system as the moisture tracks across our area. So we're not having to deal with quite as much dry air punching in to the backside of the system. We already have everything in place, so it's looking pretty good as far as the potential for seeing some heavy snow. Now, ultimately, a good portion of the heavy snow is going to be Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning. And then once we get into Wednesday afternoon and pretty much into Wednesday night is when that low pressure system continues to move eastward, and it dries out across our area, and we're left with just the cleanup after that. All right, so we're feeling pretty confident that we're going to be getting a decent amount of snow. Now, let's kind of get the timing down just a little bit. And it's going to be coming sort of in two waves. This is around midnight, 1 a.m., and this is 4 a.m. Central Time. You can see that snow begins to develop across South Central, North Dakota, North Central, South Dakota. I continue to probably see rain further to the south. Once we get to around 7 a.m. or so, that snow begins to move a little bit further east. Some light to moderate snows potentially right just east of the Missouri River by this point. And then once we get to about 10 a.m., that snow begins to move more so into the James River Valley and just starts to creep into Minnesota. Meanwhile, once again, we'll probably have a rain or rain-snow mix, nothing really accumulating further to the south. By noon or around 1 p.m., that light to moderate just starts to make its way more so into the James River Valley, perhaps into the Red River Valley as well. Rain and rain-snow mix continues further to the south. And then once we get to about 4 p.m., some of that light to moderate snow begins to move into far southwestern parts of Minnesota. And at this point, I think I'm going to kind of change over to a different model. This is the Canadian model we've been dealing with. But if I take it one time frame further, you could see how it continues that moderate snow further to the south. But this low pressure system is exiting out of the Rockies. And I think as it does so, that warm air will continue to push the snow further to the north. So I don't think the snow is going to hang around quite as long as this particular model is showing. So we move over to the European model, which actually at this point starts to jive a little bit more with the American model as well. And here you can see certainly by 6 to 7 p.m. that snow line begins to move further to the north. We got rain, snow mix, maybe a little bit of sleet in there. I am not too concerned about it, but there may be a brief little area in there that might be something more than the snow or rain, perhaps some of that little bit of grapple in there once we get into the evening hours. Now, once we start to move into 9 to 10 p.m., this is where kind of the second wave begins. We had that snow kind of linger and move to the south and east, and now this is our second wave. This is where the thunderstorms begin to develop, start to push more moisture back into the area. And then through the overnight hours is really when we start to see perhaps the heaviest snowfall occur, especially as we get more so into early Wednesday morning. This is around 4 a.m. or so. And I think actually by this point we could see some pretty decent snows right in through here through the 4 a.m. time frame. The European model doesn't pick it up more so until we get closer to that 7 a.m. time frame. And the other thing to note as we back it up one little bit, we've got some thunderstorms that could potentially make it into far southern portions of Minnesota, maybe more so into southeast Minnesota. There's an off chance that one or two of these could be severe, mainly with some hail that are going to be just reaching the severe limits of 1 inch, perhaps some gusty winds along with that as well. And then the other potential is maybe seeing some rain or freezing rain or sleet in some of this transitioning area through Minnesota through the early morning hours as well. But guys, once we get to 7 and 9 to 10 a.m., boy, that's when the snowfall is really starting to crank up, especially across southeastern portions of North Dakota, northeast South Dakota. And then as we kind of get north of the Twin Cities through Lakes Country and certainly up through Duluth, the North Shore, you're really going to be expecting a whole lot of lake effect snow as that wind comes off the lake and creates that lake effect snow. And then as we get kind of in through Bemidji and over to Alexandria or so, a fair amount of snow expected through the morning hours on Wednesday. By noon time frame or around 1 p.m., the heavier snow now begins to move more so into northeastern portions of Minnesota. We're still left with a little bit of snow perhaps lingering a little bit further back. And then once we get into the afternoon hours, around 3 to 4 p.m., light to moderate snow continuing across northern portions of Minnesota. And then once we get through the evening hours, this is 7 p.m., 9 to 10 p.m., and midnight, the snow is out of our region. And just to give you an idea what the American model is showing, especially as we get into Wednesday morning, this is 4 a.m., 7 a.m. You could see where some of that heavier snowfall wants to occur. Once again, right in through this region, in through here. You can kind of see where those heavy snowfalls wants to track through the early morning hours on Wednesday. The other thing to note is kind of watch you guys in through here, kind of take notice. You might get a little brief period of snow running through your area, but ultimately most of it's going to be rain. And if you do get any snow, of course, you're going to see some rain in behind it and really not expecting a whole lot in the way of accumulation through areas across the south. All right, so what are we looking at as far as accumulations go? This is what I've come up with here tonight. Our main area is going to be that southeast, far southeast North Dakota, northeast South Dakota, and west central portions of Minnesota. 7 to 12 inches possible within that region. Also across the far northern reaches of Lake Superior, including Duluth, and then also kind of this area of 9 to 13 inches. So just a little bit more possible due to that lake effect snow coming, or the lake effect winds creating the lake effect snow across the north shore of Lake Superior. So definitely looking at a fair amount of snowfall up there, guys. It should be pretty interesting along the North Shore. But yeah, this is where we're looking at for the heaviest amount of snowfall. And then the areas in blue, we've got 5 to 8 inches, and that does extend back into south central portions of North Dakota, north central portions of South Dakota as well. And about half of what you see here, and actually half of what you see spreading back further to the west, back closer to New Salem and Hebron, half of this is probably going to occur Tuesday afternoon. So you could say 1 to 3 inches here Tuesday afternoon, and 2 to 4 inches in through this region through Tuesday afternoon, and then the remainder picking up through the overnight hours Tuesday night and into early Wednesday morning. But further back to the east, ultimately most of this in through here is going to occur Tuesday evening and into Wednesday morning. So nevertheless, 5 to 8 inches here in the blue section. The little bit lighter blue, we're looking at 3 to 6 in through this region, again kind of moving north of the Twin Cities, extending just west of Bismarck. 2 to possibly 5 inches from far northwestern parts of Minnesota in through Minot or so, down through Killdeer and Beach. And then on the other side of it, on the south end of it, kind of poking up near Pier, dipping down just a little bit just north of Sioux Falls, and then again riding north of the Twin Cities. And then the trace to perhaps 2 inches here in the green, just kind of touching Sioux Falls, and then across the remainder of the northern portions of North Dakota. And I'll make sure to post that on Facebook and Instagram and X as well, so you can take a little bit better look at it, exactly where some of these areas lie. And then we still have that concern, at least for a little bit of freezing rain across portions of Minnesota and far east central portions of South Dakota as well. So keep that in mind on top of that, that we've got at least some sleet or perhaps some brief freezing rain as some of that rain transitions over to snow. Now, the one thing I'm not overly concerned about are the gusty winds with this. I did pick the gustier model out of all of them, but just to kind of give you the high-end amounts of some wind gusts. And this is Tuesday evening around 6 to 7 p.m. And ultimately, by this point, you know, we're looking at some accumulations in through here. So, you know, you might have some 35 to perhaps 40 mile per hour winds as we get into the evening hours of Tuesday evening, but a lot of that's going to be the wet, heavy snow, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to blow around. And then as we go through the overnight hours, this is around midnight, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and here's where the snow really begins to get going through the early morning hours of Wednesday. And that's where we're kind of focusing on in through here, right? And even there, we're looking at 35 to perhaps 40 miles per hour. And again, this is one of the higher end models. So we could still see some blowing and some drifting along with that. And guys, once the snow really gets going in some of these heavier portions, when it's really coming down and you add 30, 35, maybe 40 mile per hour winds, it's going to be very difficult to see, especially in some bands that really get heavy. So keep that in mind. You might not see blizzard warnings come out, but that doesn't mean that you won't see some brief areas below zero at times, because you're going to be running into one of those stronger bands of snow. Keep that in mind as you go into especially early portions of Wednesday morning. If I guess I'm going to be concerned about any area between the wind and the snow, I'd say probably into west central portions of Minnesota, of course, because it seems like that's just the area that always seems to get that type of weather with the low reduced visibilities. But this would be kind of the area I'd be most concerned about regarding the ultimate lack of visibility. Now, as we continue on through the day on Wednesday, winds don't stick around too much. Maybe the heavier winds further to the south, but of course, most of that is going to be rain, perhaps a little bit of light snow down there, but ultimately not concerned about the blowing and drifting down there. So with all that said, here's the current watches. We've got a winter storm watch here in blue across southeastern portions and south central portions of North Dakota, northeast South Dakota, across central and northeastern portions of Minnesota. So of course, that's got to deal with the snow, some of the wind. Of course, you got the lake effect snow that's going to be taking place across the North Shore. So that's kind of what we're looking at currently going into Monday night for watches, at least for a winter storm watch. And then you have a winter weather advisory right now in purple across northeast South Dakota and into west central portions of Minnesota. By the time some of you watch this going into Tuesday morning, wouldn't be surprised at all if you do see some winter storm warnings being issued in through this region. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And I wouldn't actually be surprised if maybe some of these winter weather advisories get flipped over to a winter storm watch. We'll see exactly how they decide to do some of this, but just a couple of things to keep in mind, especially, like I said, if you're waking up Tuesday morning and you're going, well, that's not what my map looks like. Well, that's kind of what I'm expecting here going into Monday night, at least. And perhaps I should mention along with that, wouldn't be surprised either if you see some winter weather advisories getting extended just a little bit further to the north to cover some of these counties up there. So definitely an interesting one to watch. It looks like Wednesday morning is definitely going to be a problem for some of you. So keep that in mind, depending on what you have for work, for travel. It just depends what you got going on through Wednesday. And especially, like I said, Wednesday morning, really looking problematic, unfortunately. Now, I should say in the last video, I did make mention of some uncertainty on my part as to whether after this storm passed, if we'd see anything going into the later part of the weekend. It continues to not look that way at all. Looks like everything remains to the south. So our weather pattern should get a little more quiet as we get into the weekend and on into next week. At the moment, we don't see any of these larger snow-making storms running through our area for a little while. And in fact, I think eventually we should begin to warm up, at least at the later half of next week, to where we should be seeing some pretty mild temperatures. So we'll be looking forward to that. All right, everybody. Well, travel safely, plan accordingly based on the information I just gave you. And make sure you're keeping up to date on my social media sites. If I have any updates on some of the graphics that I've shown you tonight, I'll definitely have the updates put on, like I said, Facebook, Instagram, X. So make sure you keep a look on there to see and look for any recent changes. All right, everybody, for Region Weather Live, I'm meteorologist Brad Warner. Everybody have a good day.